listening to people. Such an underrated skill, isn't it? We look at expertise, it's all about being the person that's speaking, but a lot of it is listening and just understanding what the patterns are and being responsive to what that is, but also then deciding, is this what we're after? And if we're going this way and I want to influence behavior, how do I work with my people? How do I, just truly listening to them? There's a great line, Pat Flynn talks about it. It's called learning the lyrics. Actually just using the language that you're hearing to help then shape an idea.
Yeah. And I think one of the key things, I know Gary Vee says, I know a lot of the influencers out there talk about it, some of those business leaders, but if you kind of want to make money, if you want to make impact, if you want to grow your business, find, what's the problem that your clients or your customers are having and work out a solution. So talk to me about the transition from corporate to, your own business. Now, I've got a lot of friends that are in that consultancy workshop, stepping out into their own business. It's hard as you start working with organizations because there's opportunities obviously to pull you back into corporate, right? You've always got people wanting to pull you back into corporate. How did you resist that?
How did I resist that? I guess well, that's a very interesting question. So it was actually a good idea for me to have as a fallback. So the reason I left my business was because I left the company was like, look, I won't be unemployable within 12 months. So if I do get called back, I don't see that I don't think that's failure, to be honest. I think it's just an evolution of where you're going. And so if that's you and you've been called back, there's a reason for it, like good on you. And life is a journey. For me, I think it's because I just kept consistently building up different clients, different opportunities, pivoting outside of even where I was at. This is in the first sort of 9 months of leaving. My favorite author flew me to Paris and we ran workshops for Chanel together. So, you have an experience like that. And the year after COVID hit, and I didn't go back into an organization, but I was subcontracting and doing a lot of work in a mine up north. But you do things to respond to the market and things like that as well. But never at any time was there, did I have this inkling that things weren't going to go okay. And I think I'm okay with risk tolerance. Now, saying that, I think it's very different. I have a husband who works and loves working, loves getting a paycheck. So there's always, for me, the risk, and just to be honest, is it's not as risky as someone who doesn't have that as a fallback. They've really got to be looking ahead, making sure they're generating that income and everything else. And during COVID, my business actually improved because I pivoted my content to a lot around how do you engage people virtually. And instead of working with corporations in 2020, I started selling more to B2C. So helping fellow facilitators run engaging workshops. So I've always had kind of diversified my offerings. And that I think has been that's supported my ability just to kind of stand alone and keep going.
Yeah, no, that's cool. It's kind of a bit of the burn the boats, right?
Yeah, I love that. I love, I know I love bold leadership and statements like that. I am here for.
Yep.
Vanilla and feel like we need to improve profit by 5%. That doesn't drive me.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah. And, I think you're a big believer in, within organizations, it's really about if you want to improve the bottom line, if you want to improve your profit, you have to work with your people and help your people grow.
That's all organizations are. It's just people working together. That's really it. And a lot of the focus goes on other things and strategy and everything else. And strategy is important and having a vision of where you want to go, because that does help mobilize your people. But it's the people that are delivering on that are executing on whatever plan that is. And I think I find this interesting. I'm curious to hear what you think about this, but I've seen stats this year that Gallup have shared around in the US, and I'm sure this is replicated in Australia as well. Like engagement is at an all-time low. Engagement is an all-time low, yet the amount of content and information and sessions and development that's being run around leadership is at an all-time high. Like, you look at the amount of information we have, yet I'm just curious, are you noticing the same thing? And plus like the mental health, like the overlay of that, it's all contributing to this.
I think there's actually a lot now. I
Yeah.
think a lot of organizations are like, oh, we've got to do mental health stuff. We've got to do this kind of training. We've got to run our events. And I think there's actually a lot now. And I think some of the feedback that I've had from chatting to some of my friends that are in organizations, they're like, how do we how do we do all this? You know, like
No.
they're trying to provide too much. So I think sometimes it's almost getting back to basics a little bit,
Mm.
but also making sure that you're getting the key components of what they need. And obviously, a good friend of yours and mine is Stephen Demedio, and I know hey Steve, because he'll listen to this one, I'm sure.
You will.
But you know, in the chat I had with him on the podcast as well, we were talking about, you know, organizations, you know, getting into kind of, and they talk about this on a travel perspective, him and Mark, but really about, don't think you know what your team needs.
Mm.
You know, like, actually, what do they actually need and not what you need, right? And what you think they need, because a lot of the time organizations say, okay, they need more sales training and they need more leadership training and they need all these things. And it's like, no, actually, what do they need? Like, and having the kind of courage to stand up in front of a group and kind of going, you'll see there's a blank page here. What do you want to talk about? What are the burning issues right now that we can help you go from A to B to C to D to E?
Love that. Yeah. And my biggest mistake as a leader was not doing that. You know, when I was young in WA and running a marketing department, every Monday morning is like pre-filled agenda. This is what we're talking about. These are the talking points. And then the last 5 minutes, any questions? It's, you know, but that's, I mean, you learn sort of going through that, but it was, I thought, you know, I thought, oh, I'm a friendly person. But doing that just did not inspire loyalty or discretionary effort. And yeah, I learned a lot from that experience. I think what you're talking about, absolutely true. I mean, this goes for leadership, but also goes for marketing as well. It's like just listening to people. It's such an underrated skill, isn't it? You know, we look at expertise, it's all about being the person that's speaking, but a lot of it is listening and just understanding what the patterns are and being responsive to what that is, but also then deciding, is this what we're after? And if it's not, how do I, you know, if we're going this way and I want to influence behavior, how do I work with my people? How do I, like just truly listening to them? There's a great line, Pat Flynn talks about it. It's called learning the lyrics. Actually just using the language that you're hearing to help then shape an idea too.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think one of the key things, I know Gary Vee says, I know a lot of the influencers out there talk about it, some of those business leaders, but, you know, around about, you know, if you kind of want to make money, if you want to make impact, you know, if you want to grow your business, find, you know, what's the problem that your clients or your customers are having and work out a solution.
Yeah. That's all business is. It's solving problems. And that's, I think, even my podcast, why it did so well. It was made for N equals 1. It was made for me. My problem was I need help in running these workshops. And then what you realize is that other people around the world resonate with that problem and want a solution as well. And I think we often, you're right, sometimes when things don't work, and even when I've run things that haven't worked, it's because it's been a push from me as opposed to a pull from my group. My book, The
Wow.
2-Hour Workshop Blueprint, the reason I wrote that title was because I went into my own Facebook group. I've got about 2,800 facilitators in there. I was just seeing what questions they asking. I literally got a Google sheet out. And all these questions are around, how do I run a 2-hour workshop on X, on Y, on Z? And I'm like, the pattern here is 2-hour workshops. Can I solve for that? And the reason it's sold well and continues to sell and get feedback is because it's a prescription for that problem. Yeah.
Yep. Yep. And I think one of the things you touch on there is the word collaboration, right? I think in facilitation, in organizations, in leadership, in workshops, I think these days the collaboration between great minds is a great way to not just leverage each other's kind of profile and I suppose expertise, but really just spread the impact of what each of you are bringing to the table.
Yeah, I mean, I've got a couple of phrases for this. Like one is like, I call it thought breeding. So rather than being a thought leader who just stands on their own and shares their thoughts, I think thought breeding is more fun because exactly what you've said. And then the other phrase I like is a phrase my friend Jenny Blake, she's that author I mentioned before. She talks about friend touring. So rather than
Yep.
seeing mentors as like, I'm going to look up, it's like we've got each other. And often that's
Yep.
really way more valuable. And I've even discovered in my like facilitation and consulting roles, a lot of it now is rather than like leading, there's no real content. It's more about, hey, here's a process or here's a story. How is this applicable? Like, how could you use this in your setting? And again, more lazier facilitation, but way more valuable for the group.
Yeah. And it really is, like, I've spoken in the last couple of years, spoken to people that are speakers, people that workshop facilitators. It's interesting. kind of caught up with some of them and I've said, oh, what about this or what about that? And it's so funny. So many of them are still in that scarcity mindset rather than the abundance mindset. Like
Mhm.
oh, but if I share a little bit of that, then I'll lose this. And it's kind of
No,
like, no,
you don't.
your business will grow more.
1,000,000%. I can I share a lot of ideas openly, and, like, the reason I have my daily podcast is just, like, I'm sick of putting my ideas in my iPhone notes and they're gone, and, like, if someone takes an idea and runs with it, like, well done, 'cause I don't have I don't have the time or or, like, to execute on every single idea that I have,
Yep.
and I think what is it, the saying, "A rising tide lifts all boats."
Yep.
My mentor, Alan Weiss, he is a mentor, he's not my friend, or even though I would say we're friends now, but he's definitely he's a rock star of consulting, written 60 books on the topic. He said, "Do you ever notice the people with the weakest brands never share their ideas?" Oh,
Mhm.
it's so true. It's 'cause it's that scarcity mindset. I think the more that you give, the more that you get, and it's not even about getting back, it's just about being generous and helping to just lift lift the frequency of the world a bit.
Yeah. And I think if you're true, authentic, and you connect with your, audience, at the end of the day, people can take your ideas, but the one thing they can't replicate is you.
Ah, exactly, particularly in the AI world, and this is why, I love just having great chats like this with just normal people because, not normal people, but,
Are you
um,
calling me normal? Thanks, Leanne.
well, not normal. Normal's probably not the no,
I'm
just
not normal.
genuine Aussies, genuine Aussies, real talk is probably what I
Real talk.
mean. It's probably and, even with my daily podcast, because I was like, "Well, I wanna do a podcast, but what's the topic?" And it's like, I think AI can do any topic in the world better than I could do a topic, to be honest. But what AI cannot replicate is my stupid jokes, sharing what I love, my walks out on the beach, and just riffing on myself. And so that I think is the unlock. When we're in this technology age where it's all about brilliant content and polish, it's actually the advantage is being unpolished and even that us just laughing about that stupid gag about being normal, if he'll connect with that.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. That's gonna be on, Leanne on Demand now.
Yes, I would love to play a snippet of this on the show.
That'd be awesome. So talk to me about the podcast. Obviously late last year, you're kind of like, I'm gonna launch this podcast. It's gonna be a daily.
Yeah.
Talk to me about how it's going.
Yeah, I felt when I had that idea, I was, really scared by it. And I actually did a podcast recording about how I felt even just announcing it, because then once you announce it to the world, then that's how I operate. I have a big goal. I wanna share it with people because I don't like letting other people down, but I can quietly let myself down. So the first thing I had to do was the second I decided, I was like, "Commit, share it to my, 200 people on Instagram," but that's still a commitment. I was really worried about, what's the format here? I think the biggest hurdle for me was what is a podcast? And, my show was weekly. It was like yours, 1 hour interviews, really great show notes. I'd promote the guests thoroughly, do all this work post-production. And I thought daily, I just can't do that. So it was really a kind of radically rethinking and challenging every assumption I had about podcasting because I had to make it a daily show. I think the best thing about it, what's been really cathartic is what I shared before is that last year I'd have these ideas and I'd get really frustrated with myself because I'm like, that's a good idea. But it just wouldn't go anywhere and then I'd forget about it. But now at least I have a forum where if I just have an idea, and usually it comes to me like a couple of words or a cool phrase. Now I just grab up my phone, I talk about it for 5 minutes, and that's an episode. And for me, it's not even about. I don't really mind. I don't. I'm not. It's not driven by building an audience. There's no external measure of success for it. The measure of success for it is just me committing to something, having a bit of discipline around something because I'm pretty organic and love going with the flow. So that's nice. And the other thing is I have an outlet. It's a creative expression. And now that I'm doing it, actually, I'm noticing more in the world, and
Yep.
these stories that I would forget are actually becoming part of the show and becoming something that's quite memorable that I can use in speeches and workshops after that. Because
Yeah.
often I don't know if you find this when you're running a workshop, you're like, "Oh, I want to explain this point. I need a story for it," and it's hard to find a story in the moment. But if you start collecting stories every day, you've got a bank that you can use.